Hey everyone, this is Chad D. I wanted to do a quick standalone episode to talk about what happened in Minnesota and what's going on with ICE before my regularly scheduled planned full-length episode is released here later this evening. I think history is being written in real time, and I want to be so clear about the side of it that I'm on. There's no way that anyone can watch the footage coming out of Minneapolis and say that this is justified. You cannot claim support for the Constitution or claim to believe in law and order and then turn around and defend everything that ICE is doing right now. ICE, as it's operating under this administration, is fundamentally at odds with what this country was founded on. Policies that allow officers to go door to door, enter homes, or conduct operations without warrants is not American. The Constitution is not whatever someone decides it is in any given moment. It's explicit, it's clear, it's binding. It lays out protections against unreasonable searches and seizures, against abuses of power, and against federal agencies acting outside of the law, and yet people still support this. There's a hard truth that a lot of Republicans don't want to sit with, and it's if you support these actions, you're supporting something that runs directly counter to the Constitution. This was never about law and order. It was always about Donald Trump using federal power for retaliation and political leverage. We saw that laid bare last night in reporting about Attorney General Pam Bondi. It was confirmed that Pam Bondi sent a letter to Minnesota Governor Tim Walz laying out what she called conditions to restore the rule of law in the state after two fatal encounters involving federal immigration agents in Minneapolis. In that letter, she demanded that Minnesota turn over information about state welfare programs, abandon sanctuary policies, and provide the Department of Justice access to voter rolls to verify voter registration practices. So I want to pause on that for a minute because federal immigration enforcement is now being explicitly linked to demands for voter data and state-level political concessions. Pam Bondi framed these as common sense steps, saying that they would bring back law and order. But at the same time, President Trump publicly connected the presence of federal agents in Minnesota to an alleged welfare fraud scandal and accused state leaders of orchestrating a cover-up. He claimed that billions of dollars were being misused and went on to accuse the governor and mayor of inciting unrest. Governor Tim Walz did respond by demanding that federal officers leave the state after another man was killed during a federal operation yesterday, saying that they were just trying to sow chaos and violence. So that's the pattern. A deadly encounter happens, Trump expands his federal powers, and then political ultimatums follow, like turn over the voter rolls, change state policy, fall in line. This is what Trump wants. He wants there to be chaos because if there's anything that he's been trying to figure out how to do over the past year, it's how he can invoke the Insurrection Act, and he's finally figured out a pathway to do so. So you can't say that this is about public safety while tying immigration raids to election administration. The two don't go together. You cannot claim constitutional fidelity while floating the idea that enforcement will escalate or withdraw depending on political compliance. That's the exact kind of thing that the Constitution was written to prevent. And it's not an abstract theory that I'm presenting to you because people are literally being killed. Communities are being destabilized right in front of us. Governors are being threatened with federal retaliation, and Americans are being told that this is what law and order looks like. It's not. Law and order does not mean militarized tactics paired with political demands. It does not mean federal agencies bargaining with states over voter rolls. It does not mean rewriting constitutional protections to suit whoever is in power. When people look back at how this country responded when federal authority was used in the way that it's being used, the question will be simple. Who spoke up and who decided it was easier to look away? Like, who looked away when Alex Preddy was gunned down in broad daylight by untrained thugs? Alex was a 37-year-old intensive care nurse at a veteran affairs hospital who, according to his family, cared deeply about his patients and about the direction of this country. He was born in Illinois. He was raised in Wisconsin. He was active in sports as a teenager. He was a Boy Scout. He was in a boys choir. He graduated from the University of Minnesota with a degree in biology, and he was a research scientist, and he eventually did go back to school to become a registered nurse. Alex lived about 2 miles away from where he was killed in Minneapolis, and he was described by neighbors as quiet and generous and quick to help others. His parents said that he was deeply troubled by the Trump administration's immigration policies and had participated in protests following earlier ICE-related shootings in the city. They described him as compassionate and motivated by a belief that what was happening to people in his community was wrong. Family members emphasized that Alex was indeed a U.S. citizen with no criminal record beyond minor traffic tickets. They said he legally owned a handgun and had a permit to carry in Minnesota, but they never had known him to routinely carry it. And after his death, they struggled struggled to get information from authorities and learned of the shooting through a reporter before receiving confirmation from the medical examiner. The family strongly disputed public claims from federal officials that he posed a violent threat, saying videos appeared to show him holding a phone, not a weapon, and trying to shield another person during the confrontation. They described him simply as a good man and urged the full truth about what happened to be made public. So where are the people who say that they care about life in all circumstances? Does Alex Preddy sound like a threat to society? Does this sound like someone who people should be comfortable seeing killed by gunfire during a federal operation? Because if this could happen to him in Minnesota, it can happen to anyone in this country, including people who think that they're safely outside the radius of these policies. And at some point, Americans have to decide when enough is enough. We talked about this before a while ago, but it bears repeating. ICE is rapidly expanding their numbers, and the reporting on how that expansion is happening should alarm anyone who cares about public safety or constitutional limits on state power. According to recent investigative reports, the Trump administration set aggressive deportation targets and then demanded that ICE scale up at unprecedented speeds, promising to double staffing and celebrating what the Department of Homeland Security called a 120% manpower increase in just 4 months. But behind those announcements is a different reality. Only a fraction of those new hires have actually completed full academy training. About 1,200 recruits finished in-person instruction, while another 3,000 with previous law enforcement backgrounds completed only online courses. And even so, thousands of people were issued badges and firearms before fully deploying. Veteran ICE officials told reporters that many of the new recruits lack the qualifications normally required for this kind of work, and that the dropout rates at the academy have approached 50% in some classes. The administration also shortened the length of training dramatically. What once took about 5 months has been cut to 42 days. And within that window, officials say recruits are taught arrest techniques, firearm safety, use of force policies, and conflict management. But according to one veteran ICE official, only about 4 hours are devoted specifically to de-escalation tactics. 4 hours. That is what stands between a tense encounter and someone losing their life. Veteran officers interviewed for an article that was in The Atlantic described walking into offices full of new personnel they believed would never have made it through a standard hiring process. Others raised alarms about offices lacking basic equipment like desks, protective gear, and parking spaces because hiring had moved so quickly. Some returning retirees sent to Minnesota reportedly quit within days, citing conditions and the scale of the crackdown, while others were forced into unfamiliar street-level roles that differed sharply from the slower planned arrest operations they had spent their careers performing. This is a context in which Alex Preddy was killed. Federal officials claimed that he approached agents with a gun and violently resisted arrest. They released an image of a pistol and suggested that he intended to cause mass harm. But videos taken by bystanders appear to show Alex holding a phone, not a weapon, as agents shoved him back toward the sidewalk. According to those recordings, he did not appear to attack officers. His family says that he was trying to help someone who was being pepper sprayed, which was obvious in the video. That discrepancy is not a minor detail. It goes directly to the question of whether force was justified and whether federal agents operating under this new surge are adequately trained to handle volatile situations in crowded public spaces. This is why people should be paying attention to the structure of this expansion by ICE, an agency that receives tens of billions of dollars in new funding, that is ordered to meet political targets for arrests and deportations, and that cuts training pipelines while rushing thousands of armed personnel into the field is creating a very predictable risk. That risk is not abstract. It's not a theory like we were talking about earlier. It shows up in neighborhoods and on sidewalks and in confrontations that we're seeing on social media where split-second decisions determine whether someone goes home alive. We saw it with Renee Good. We just saw it yesterday with Alex. If people are serious about protecting life, about due process, about public safety, then they can't ignore how these operations are being built from the ground up. You cannot defend ICE's mass hiring on a compressed timeline with limited de-escalation training and internal warnings from veteran officers and then act shocked when deadly outcomes follow.